This is LBC. Call Clegg. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. 0845 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Leading Britain's conversation. This is Call Clegg on LBC.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday the 1st of May. That means it's time for Call Clegg with me, Nick Clegg, here on LBC. So in the next half an hour, you can ask me any question you want. Get involved. Call on 0845 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. And of course, you can watch on the website, lbc.co.uk. So let's go straight to the first caller, Daniel. Daniel in Hackney. Hello, Daniel.
Good morning, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, and thank you very much for taking my call.
Not at all.
And good morning, Mr. Ferrari.
Hello, sir.
My question is obviously relating to the recent murder of the teacher. And I get quite concerned, and I was really perturbed to hear that we're still talking about, not reacting with knee-jerk reaction. And obviously, the policeman the other day on TV was saying, obviously, this is an isolated case. Now, what does that statement need to make us? My question is, do we continue still saying, when something like this happens, we keep saying, well, we shouldn't react with a knee-jerk reaction. Something definitely, obviously needs to be done. And now, what are you, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, going to do regarding this?
Well, I think, firstly, it is. I think everybody quite understandably is profoundly shocked by this. The notion that any teacher should lose their life in the classroom is just horrific. And I think perhaps it was especially poignant because she was clearly such a widely respected and loved teacher who, by all accounts, went in on her day off, had been there for years, and so on. I think in terms of our reaction, Daniel, I don't want to see, and I'm sure you don't want to see, Daniel, every school feel like an airport terminal. We want our classrooms to be classrooms, not battle zones. And so, of course, head teachers, and they have those powers anyway, Daniel, it's very important to stress this. If you're a head teacher in a school where you think that kids are coming in with implements and offensive weapons that could be a danger to teaching staff, you have every right to take measures to check them out, to make sure that they don't have those things on them. But do I think that the government centrally should suggest that, I don't know, in extremis, that we have metal detectors at the entrance of every school? I think that would be, I don't think that would be right at all. I think we should allow schools to take the measures that they need to in their areas. There are clearly some schools which might have bigger problems than others. But I don't think, and look, I say this with some caution, I didn't know Anne Maguire, of course, but I suspect from what little I've read about, or know about her, a teacher like that, a dedicated teacher like that, wouldn't want to see the education system. And I think her headmaster has said that she herself wouldn't want to see the school system turn into a sort of high security environment. So that's the balance we're trying to strike, Daniel, and that's the way in which I think most people, including, very admirably, everybody at Anne Maguire's school, that's the way that most people are reacting.
Response from you, Daniel?
Oh, yeah, I was thinking how do we know if we don't try it? That might...
Try what, Daniel? Can you just tell me?
The metal detecting system. Obviously, I do understand what you're saying, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. We probably need to try it because it might
every
just
school?
be the thing that, that's for the government to decide. Obviously, yeah, probably yes, because
Right.
that might just make a difference. Because at least we know if there is a metal detector there, we are reassured that any child that comes in with anything metal, at least they will be taken off them.
Daniel, look, at the moment, at least, I don't agree with you that what we should do, however horrific, however shocking, however tragic this terrible murder has been in Leeds. I think to really change our school system that profoundly, the look, the feel, the ethos of our school system would change overnight if we were to make the entrances to our school system very similar to an airport terminal. And I just think that would be something that I suspect Anne Maguire, well, at least that's what the head teacher himself has said, would not welcome. And I think that would be a great shame in many ways. Fear would have triumphed.
Despite the Sky News survey, Deputy Prime Minister, 1,000 pupils caught with weapons including guns, axes, a meat cleaver, even a taser gun in 2011. Yes. 80 primary school children, some with a flick knife. Yes. You're still saying you're still.
No, what I'm saying is, to be absolutely clear, is that teachers and head teachers are free. They are empowered. It's very important you understand this, Daniel. They are empowered to take measures, to inspect kids, to take whatever measures they like. They're free to do that. The law is on their side, will back them to make sure that kids are caught out where they're coming to school with things that they shouldn't, and particularly with dangerous implements. What Daniel was putting to me was a rather different proposition, which was that the government centrally says that all schools need to have the same kind of metal detection tests across the piece. That is something I'm very reluctant at the moment to endorse.
Daniel, thank you. We move on.
Chris in Croydon. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
How are we doing, okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you?
I want to know, how can you tackle the gambling issue?
Is this just some background, Chris? Are you talking about the betting machines that we talked about?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
This is... Stay on the line, Chris. You'll be aware of this, Deputy Prime Minister. Councils in this country will get stronger powers to prevent harm being done by what's called this high street cocaine or crack cocaine-style gambling machines in bookmakers up and down the land. In future, if anybody wants to stake £50, they're going to have to ask a member of staff. Is that a tough enough sanction, Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, we looked at this long and hard, and Helen Grant, the Minister, has been doing all this work, announced yesterday that as well as giving councils greater powers to make sure that where local communities are worried that their high streets are being turned into just a long row of betting shops, the councils can take action. But also that there's been a lot of focus on these fixed odd betting terminals, and are they particularly encouraging those who are vulnerable, low incomes, to fritter away a lot of their money. And I think what Helen Grant's done is strike the right balance between saying, look, we're not going to start banning all this. We're not, people are adults. They should be trusted to take their own risks, so to speak, but that there should be kind of steps, if you like, to make sure that they're often prompted to think, are they doing the right thing? Should they carry on? If they want to go further than £50 stakes, they can do so, but they've got to then go to a counter to
do you honestly think a member of staff is going to say no, particularly when in some instances they're incentivised to make sure people do put money in the machines?
It's not so much does the staff tell you what to do if you're placing these bets. It's more that to get someone who's placing those bets off that kind of automatic adrenaline rush treadmill where they're not pausing to even think about whether they should take the next step. That's the basic thing, including, by the way, pop-up questions on the screen itself. So if you've been on the terminal for a certain period of time, you're asked, take a break.
Do you play these, Mr. Clegg?
No,
I don't. No interest. No. Chris, do you play them?
I have played them in the past, and what you were saying about if you go obviously to the cashier and say, they're going to tell you no to put more money in, you can just go to another William Hill. How do they know how much money you put in the previous William Hill?
Yeah,
they're not going to.
Yeah,
and in the same scenario as that, I could go home, I could go on the internet, I could go on my phone. This gambling online is worse than is a crack cocaine addiction. I don't care what anyone says, because you can do it 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and Chris, so you think it should just be banned altogether?
I personally think that if it's affecting people's lives, then yeah, it should be banned.
Yeah, I mean, look, the balance we're trying to strike, and I followed this debate for a long period of time, is to strike the right balance between, in a free society, allowing adults to take their own risks, even if they're risks that you might not take or might not, even if you're not a gambler, if other people want to do that, they should be free to do that in a free society. But to get them, as I say, off this, what I'm told can be this kind of treadmill where you're just absolutely getting sucked into placing more and more money, taking bigger and bigger risks. And I think a lot of the measures that Helen Grant's announced is not only to protect the high street, where local communities want to protect the high street, but also to protect those kind of gamblers by prompting them to stop and think about whether they should take the next turn of the wheel, so to speak.
Chris, good luck. Try and rein in that gambling. Do it responsibly. As long as it's only a few quid, it's a bit of fun. After that, it gets a bit dangerous. Deputy Prime Minister
Andrew in Docklands. Hello, Andrew.
Yes, hello there.
Hi.
My question is, with the debacle over the post office sell-off, Isn't this just another reason why the government and yourselves should not be involved in the economy at all? Because they just seem to be rigging prices low in the case of this post office thing, and also with interest rates are rigged low, so it kills savers and it kills true investment, and the only people who benefit are those in the city who obviously the people you're looking out for most.
I can't help but point out, Andrew, you just said that doesn't this show that the government should butt out of the economy? And that's, of course, exactly what we're doing by butting out of running and owning the Royal Mail. Because
you did set the price, though.
Well, I'll come to that in a minute. But let's remember the background to this. The background is you as a taxpayer and everybody else. Every other taxpayer in the country has been asked by previous governments to bail out the Royal Mail time and time and time and time again. It's cost the country the earth, and
I didn't ask you to do that. You volunteered it, as far as I can see.
No, sorry, I was saying about the past. If you just look at the past, it's a fact. It's not an expression of opinion, Andrew, that previous governments have asked you, the taxpayer, to pay, all of us, to pay endless bailouts for the Royal Mail because it was being poorly run and it wasn't able to stand on its own 2 feet. So what we've done, which is, by the way, what previous governments have tried and failed to do again and again and again, is actually exactly what you prescribe, which is get the government and indeed the taxpayer off the hook so that the Royal Mail stands on its own 2 feet and is not constantly having to come rushing to you, the taxpayer.
With respect, Nick, you're missing the point. My point is that what happens while we get nationalisations and privatisation is because basically the taxpayer has been sold that business in the first place. Then when it doesn't make money, it then goes back privatised again. And then when it doesn't make money again, it goes back into the public sector. It's just a merry-go-round that the taxpayer is picking up for, and then big corporations, etc., are making all the money out of.
No, but it's not going to be renationalised, and I can't think of too many examples of where you say what has occurred. What you say, where industries which have been privatised are then sort of taken back into national ownership in a panic. Look, the controversy, which is perfectly legitimate controversy, and I think Vince Cable has been totally upfront and completely clear, and I think he's argued his case very strongly and well, is about the way in which the price was set and the manner in which the price then rose on the stock market. And what Vince Cable is saying, that firstly the share price which was set at 330 was at the highest or higher end of the range that he was advised independently, and secondly, he doesn't. Given that the Royal Mail in the past has been bailed out on so many occasions, given that there was a threat of industrial action, it is not surprising at that time. I know there's a great deal of people who say that we shouldn't know then what we know now, but at that time it was perfectly rational and reasonable for people to price in that risk at the share price in which it was offered. Now, the fact that it has gone, in a sense, has risen considerably since then, is not something that anyone sort of widely predicted at the time because of the risks and uncertainties about privatising Royal Mail. Remember, this is something which has been tried and not succeeded in happening under several previous administrations. So there's a lot of risk in all of this.
Mr. Clegg, you and I have talked about this before.
We have.
I've done a bit of research into this, and one firm that advised Dr. Cable, Panmure Gordon, pointed out that the property at Mount Pleasant alone was worth £1.5 billion. That gave a share price at a potential of about 325. You telling me the rest of the Royal Mail was worth 5p? How was Mr. Cable doing his figures? With coloured beads on an abacus?
No, well, look, he's explained...
Mount Pleasant is worth 1.5 billion, Panmure Gordon says. That's 325, so the rest of the Royal Mail is worth 5p.
You know very well, Nick, that having done your research, that the share price doesn't depend on one asset of a company.
No, but that's how they valued the business.
They don't just value it, as it happens, just on the basis of one building. They value it on the basis of how they think the business is going to do in the long run. Is it going to successfully be able to stand on its own 2 feet? And as it happens, many people predicted that the price would be lower than even the price which was set by... Well, no, a fair number. And I'll tell you why. There was a lot of talk at the time about strike action. There was a lot of talk saying previous governments have done this and have, just kind of lost their nerve at the last minute. So there was a lot of risk and uncertainty involved. And at the end of the day, the responsibility of Vince Cable, and a responsibility which he has successfully discharged, is to make sure that Royal Mail can stand on its own 2 feet. So we don't need to return to Andrew and taxpayers up and down the country to continually bail it out and to take the best advice provided to him independently. He did all of those things. He did all of those things. If, I totally understand when people say, well, why did you not know then what the price is going to be today? I'll tell you why we didn't know then. because it was then and not now. And
what is now, of course, is the Lazard involvement, of which I'm sure you're aware. The front page of the Financial Times today, the investment arm of the government's independent advisor on the privatisation of Royal Mail, making an £8 million profit, Deputy Prime Minister, selling shares during the first week of trading. This is Lazard. Your response to that?
Well, you've got to remember, there are, in a sense, two bits of Lazard, and there's a sort of Chinese wall between them. And you mustn't confuse one or the other. There's the
asset management.
Yes, asset management. Yep. They're the people who bought and sold the shares.
6 million of the.
And then there is Lazard Banks, which gave advice to the government. But they're not one and the same thing. The National Audit Office that looked at this aspect, and they did look at this aspect in their report about the flotation, were very clear that this was done entirely according to standard practice. That you have these distinctions within these institutions, and that there's absolutely no collusion or funny,
though, isn't it? Lazard and Co. is the parent company.
What you should get the NAO, get get the financial authorities, the regulators, onto your programme and ask them.
Lazard and Co. is the parent company, is it not?
Yes, of course it is. But what I'm saying,
there's a bit of a whiff, isn't there, Mr. Clegg?
No, there is not a whiff. It's very clear, and I think you should be. You shouldn't suggest that there is a kind of whiff of collusion when there is none, and when the National Audit Office has said there's absolutely none, and when these walls, these Chinese walls, if you like, exist within these financial institutions, have done, are strictly policed by the regulators.
My listener on the bus now, honestly, what is he or she meant to take from this, Mr. Clegg?
Well, I hope what your listener on the bus will say, if they're listening on the bus,
listen everywhere.
I'm delighted to hear it, up and down the country, indeed. Nationally, is that yes, of course, there is legitimate controversy, legitimate questions, and absolutely, Vince Cable, everybody in government should be put under intense scrutiny about the decisions. But I hope no one will doubt the fact that Vince Cable took decisions based on independent advice, that he set the share price, as I say, at the higher range of the range that he'd been advised upon, and that at the end of the day, given how much uncertainty there was, given that this has been tried and failed in the past, and given that it's important that taxpayers aren't constantly kept on the hook for bailing out Royal Mail in the future, I think he's done a good job.
We move on, Mr. Clegg.
Johnny in Dulwich. Hello, Johnny.
Good morning, Mr. Clegg, and honour to speak to you.
Good to speak to you.
My question is a two-part question. It's the situation that Simon Danzig talked about in his recent book with Cyril Smith. Yeah. One incident being pulled over and officers finding child pornography in the boot of his car and taking him to a police station. And during the investigation, a phone call was placed that ordered his release. And so the two parts of the question are: one, do you have a theory why someone would want to make that phone call? And secondly, who in the country would?
Do you know when that event? Do you know what year that event was?
I'm afraid I don't know.
No. Okay.
Was this during? Do we have any sense? It's probably during the 70s, is it? I would imagine.
60s, maybe.
Imagine so, yeah.
During his prime, yeah. So the two-part question: why would someone make the call? What was the second? Which might be rather difficult for Mr. Clegg, but we move on. Yeah. What's the second part, Johnny?
Then, or even now, who would have the power to usurp the police's investigation?
Yeah. Johnny, look, you asked a very, very serious question, obviously about a set of serious allegations about a cover-up by the police and the security services. That's what's alleged. A cover-up, by the way, of repugnant alleged offences as well, sexual offences by Cyril Smith, involving not only him, but the allegation is politicians from different parties, stretching over a long period of time, 60s, 70s, different parts of the country. The Greater Manchester area, a children's home in southwest London is also being scrutinised. As you know, in Cyril Smith's case, a lot of what he's alleged to have done happened back in the 60s when he was a Labour politician, then he was a Liberal politician, then only very latterly was he a Liberal Democrat. I think the only people who can get to the bottom of something which stretches over so many decades, involves so many different individuals alleged to be coming from all different political parties, and crucially involves very seriously an allegation of a cover-up by the police themselves and indeed the security services and other people in positions of authority. The only people who can get to the bottom of that, because this is about criminal wrongdoing, are people who are equipped to deal with criminal investigations, namely the police. And that's why the fact that the Greater Manchester Police were already looking into what happened at what was alleged to have happened at this children's home in the Greater Manchester area, and the Met are looking in a separate investigation into what is alleged to have happened at a children's home in Richmond in southwest London. That is a good start. The fact they've now gone further, and that Peter Fahey, the head of the Greater Manchester Police, said that the police are now reviewing what's been alleged in Simon Danchuk's book about a cover-up. with a view to then maybe taking further action. I think that is all that is right. That is right in order that we can finally get to the bottom of all of this.
So what are the Lib Dems doing?
Well, as I say, no single political party can get to the bottom of something which involves so many different individuals.
But you can find out what was known within your own party. I mean, Tim Farron, the Lib Dem president, says your party needs to answer, quote, serious questions about who knew what about Cyril Smith.
Tim Farron said, quite rightly, that it's only the police are equipped and have the authority to get to the bottom of allegations which span so many decades, so many different political parties, and also the allegations, as I say, allege what is in effect an institutional cover-up by the police, security services, and others. There are no single political
the Liberal Party of old.
Well, as I said, David Steele has spoken for himself. The only thing he didn't.
I thought you'd spoken to Lord Steele, and he said he didn't know anything about it. Do you remember you told me that?
Yeah, the Chief Whip spoke to him.
Yeah. Oh, the Chief Whip spoke to him, and he said he didn't know anything about it.
Well, of course he didn't know about it.
Subsequently, it appears he did know a little bit about
it. No. Look, absolutely clear. David Steele spoke to the Chief Whip. In fact, I spoke to David Steele about this yesterday, and he confirmed that he did speak to the Chief Whip exactly as I said. He also confirmed that he had of course he didn't know that sort of Cyril Smith was getting up to something and then didn't act on it, or didn't. All he knew about was what was in the public domain through private eye, and he's always been very open about that.
But 2 weeks ago you told me Neil Steele didn't know anything.
He didn't know that Cyril Smith was sort of up to something that no one else knew about. Of course.
Don't you need to slam your hand on the desk and demand a full inquiry?
What you need to do, what we need to do is for the police to get to the bottom of something which no party political inquiry can get to the bottom of. No political party on its own is going to be able to do justice to a set of allegations which cover so many people, such a span of time, and involves very serious allegations that the police and the security services themselves didn't act.
And so we can move on, and just to nail this then, so with your conversation with David, now Lord Steele, yesterday, you've ascertained what? What do you know now that you didn't know before from having spoken with Lord Steele?
Nothing new. Because he's always been. We've been very consistent throughout. All he knew was what was in the public domain and private eye. He didn't know, which was what we talked about last week.
Boys' bottoms or something. I think he
did not know anything more than that. He confirmed this week that he had absolutely no inkling of anything, not even any additional rumours, because the suggestion was that somehow he must have known something that he somehow kept to himself, and he knew what was going on and somehow didn't act on it. Right. That is not true, and he and indeed myself have been consistent throughout this.
All right, we move on. Johnny, thank you for your call. Mr. Clegg.
Wendy in Herne Hill. Hello, Wendy.
Hi there. I was just wondering what your comments were with regards to these new mortgage questions that have been raised. I mean, I'm quite aware as an estate agent myself that these questions have been going along on a while, but obviously by law all the building societies and banks now have to adhere to them. Do you not feel that we're basically trying to get people to change their lifestyle before they've even got a mortgage, specifically first-time buyers, the youngsters, who it's hard enough for them to even get a mortgage in the first place. But you're talking about some of these young people that have student loans already, they've come out of university, they've got their jobs, they've started working, they're going to be spending money on things until they decide that it's time for them to apply for a mortgage.
These are the new instructions or questions from the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. Wendy, stay on the line.
Wendy, I think we're trying to strike the right balance between, obviously, particularly helping first-time buyers get their feet on the first rung of the property ladder, and that's what the Help to Buy scheme is all about, which is providing unprecedented help to first-time buyers, but making sure that we don't, in a sense, repeat the mistakes of the past and have people, mortgaged, up to their neck and above, and unable to service their mortgages, because that then, of course, only leads to the problems we've seen in the past. So I think it's right for the regulators to say, look, the mortgage lenders.
Ask about haircuts and gym membership. When you bought your first house, were you asked how often you had your hair cut?
No,
Neither was
I. But look, to be fair, Wendy, you may have looked through the whole questionnaire.
Wendy's an estate agent, of course, just to remind you. Yeah.
Wendy, you might be able to tell me, but I mean, I think the purpose of the questions is legitimate, is to make sure that when people are given a mortgage, that the mortgage lenders are confident that mortgage can indeed be repaid on the schedule and at the rate in which it's been agreed. And I think that's fair.
I understand that, and I understand the reasons for the questions. I've got one other point to make.
Yeah.
As a government, your government have instigated this Help to Buy scheme, which is basically actively encouraging first-time buyers to spend more money than they have, and then in 5 years' time, when they've actually managed to get a mortgage in the first place, they're then going to be hit with another amount of money at God knows what interest rates that they're then going to have to spend paying the other half of their deposit back. So on one hand, you're telling these people that they can't get a mortgage because they've got a haircut, but on the other hand, you're telling them that you're going to help them buy somewhere, and then in 5 years' time, they're going to have to pay twice as much as they're paying for their mortgage.
No, well, Wendy, as you know, the Help to Buy scheme, of course, has got two different components to it. But let's just focus on the bit which is focused on first-time buyers. It is not to encourage people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford a mortgage to sort of lure them into making commitments which are not sustainable. It's making sure that credit-worthy first-time buyers, so not people who, in a sense, shouldn't be taking that risk, are given the help to do so. It's not encouraging irresponsible lending or even irresponsible borrowing. It's making sure that those people who are creditworthy, who can shoulder those commitments, are given the assistance to do so, because, as you know as well as I do, it's those first steps in the property market that are often the most difficult ones, and they invariably then make it easier for people to stay in the property market and stay as owners later on. So that's the idea behind Help to Buy, and it's one of the reasons as well, as you know, why we've also given the Bank of England unprecedented powers to tell us whether they think we've got the balance right as far as the Help to Buy scheme is concerned.
Wendy, I know you'll excuse me for moving on. I must get some emails in as well. Graham in Bushy asks you, you're extolling the virtues of electric cars, Mr. Clegg, yet why is your official car and probably your private car not an electric one? Is this the case of Lib Dems do as I say, not as I do?
Well, the official one, look, I'm afraid that's not a decision that I personally take, not least for security.
Well, you could say, right, I don't.
As if you really must know, as it happens, some of us in government are driven around in sort of especially protected cars, and I've no idea whether
Well, you can do that with an electric car.
I've no idea whether you can.
I've no glass on it.
I've no idea whether you can. I've no idea whether you can.
If I research it, will you take...
by all means, you're doing a lot of research.
I'm honestly,
very impressed.
I work
time to do so
I've
much.
gone mad.
But as far as my own personal car, look, actually, as it happens, I would love to buy an electric car if they produced more of the kind of family-size people carrier cars. I drive a second-hand Ford Galaxy.
Right.
Not in prime
Sounds
condition.
Like a minicab.
Not in prime condition. I accept. I've had it for many, many years. I'd love to switch to electric cars, and but as it happens, most, not quite all, but almost all of the electric cars on the market at the moment are smaller ones, and not quite right for a family of my.
You've got three boys with rugby boots and all
that kind of stuff. But listen, I just for those who don't know, the incentives to buy electric cars now are fantastic. You get £5,000 off the price, the ticket price of because of the subsidy we're giving. We're installing rapid charge, chargers, electric chargers in every single motorway service station by the end of this year. It costs you £1 on an electric car to drive from Manchester to Liverpool. You pay no duty. You don't pay congestion charge. It's really worth doing.
All right. One last email before we go back. This is from Rachel in Kent. Nick, has your mate Nigel bottled it? By which I take to mean Nigel Farage, the leader of UKIP, deciding not to run in the by-election in Newark.
Look, he's taken his decision, and he's obviously taken... I mean, I know he pretends he's some great sort of anti-politician. In fact, he's a politician to his fingertips. I mean, I joined the European Parliament the same day. He's still there. I left ages ago. He's been knocking around in politics since he was knee-high to a grasshopper, and he just took a sort of, if you like, a classic politician's decisions, or, I think he himself said, the bubble might burst if I try and do this. The bubble will burst one day, by the way, but maybe not quite soon.
So did he bottle it?
Well, he's decided not to do it. Look, he's perfectly free to do that. The point I would make about obviously UKIP's doing very well in the polls, attracting a lot of attention at the moment. I just think when people come to vote for them, whether it's in Newark or in the European elections, you just have to ask yourself over and over again, do these people have the right answers to these difficult questions about how you keep jobs in this country, how you put money back in people's pockets? And they don't, or none of those counts.
And
by the way, I'm talking about Europe at a Twitter town hall. Yeah.
Put me down for that.
Yeah. I look forward to some of your tweet interventions this afternoon. This very afternoon.
This very afternoon. All right.
2:30.
Twitter. You're getting very good at this job.
Can I do any more product placement?
Twitter town hall with Nick Clegg, who apparently, and I feel a bit upset having to say this, you're a self-obsessed, revolting character who's so dishonest you can't tell the difference between truth and lies. So says Dominic Cummings, a former aide to Michael Gove, in an interview. You, Mr. Clegg, are the worst kind of modern MP. You only care about your image.
It's bizarre, isn't it? It was particularly bizarre since I don't know the guy. If he walked into the studio, I wouldn't recognise him, so heaven knows why.
You used to regularly demand hundreds of millions of taxpayers' money for latest absurd gimmicks.
No, listen, I'll tell you what, I don't know this guy, and he's obviously got anger management issues, but where he is right is that, yeah, look, I have regularly said to these sort of slightly loopy ideologues like him on the right wing of the Tory party, I've stopped them from imposing, from their sort of, where they lurk in the Department for Education, their ideological experiments on our school system. So I said to them, no, you can't turn the clock back to a 1950s style exam system which divides kids up. You can't introduce profit making into state schools. And he, by all accounts, I don't know this guy at all, by the way, he doesn't know me at all, but there you go. He is apparently fervently opposed, as is most of the Conservative Party. I think they're making a huge mistake in my plan, which we're going to deliver this autumn, which means that all kids in the first few years of primary school will be able to get free, healthy meals at lunchtime, so their parents don't have to pay for school meals. Look, they've got an ideological bee in their bonnet, right? They want to impose all sorts of crackpot ideas on our school system, and I've said no. And by the way, I would do it every day of the week, however abusive or silly his insults want to be.
One final call, just after I say we're at the heart of an election campaign. You have the chance to hear from all major parties. I must do this for legal matters that Mr. Clegg will appreciate. From 3 o'clock this afternoon, Shadow Housing Minister Emma Reynolds will be taking your calls on LBC. Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, is with Ian Dale from 5. And tomorrow, UKIP Deputy Leader Paul Nuttall will be taking your calls with Julia Hartley-Brewer from 1. All candidates are on lbc.co.uk. Apologies for that. I have to do it for various reasons. We finished with the last question.
Jill in Ashford. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Nick.
Hello, Jill.
I just wanted to ask you about there was a programme last night, Panorama, about care in elderly care homes, and it was really quite appalling, actually, about the care. And the families had to actually put their own cameras in there to monitor the care. And they found out that, obviously, the older people weren't being looked after properly. But the main thing is, I work in the community as well. The nurses are, people on the front line are absolutely on their knees because we haven't got the staff. And as you know, the population's getting older, and there's a big, going to be a massive retirement of people my age. Going to exit.
I've got to move you to a question, Jill.
Sorry?
It's Nick Ferrari here. I've got to move you to the question of Nick Clegg, if I can, Jill. Sorry.
What do they do about, they have all these people monitoring things, but the care doesn't seem to improve. And they picked up on there was bad practice going on, but 3-4 times, and they went back, but things hadn't improved. Then an undercover reporter went in, and it's just appalling, really.
No, it's sick. I didn't see it, Jill, but I read about it. I have to say to you, I think Panorama have done the country a real service the way they've lifted the lid on what is just inhumane abuse and indifference and sort of callousness towards, old, vulnerable people who need help and just aren't getting help and are crying out for help. It really is heartbreaking.
What does the government do?
Well, I think there are two things we need to do. Firstly, you're quite right, Jill. The social care system is under pressure, so we need to make sure we put it on a sustainable kind of footing where we do provide proper, decent care to people. And you're quite right. The demographics, as we're all getting older, ageing society, this is one of the biggest challenges we face. And because I don't have time to go into all of it into painstaking detail, I think one of the things we need to do is make sure that the NHS and the social care system, who just don't work together, they just don't work in harness, are properly integrated. And where that's happened in parts of the country, it's been really successful. It's led to much, much better social care being provided. And it stops, for instance, elderly people ending up, because, they've had a fall at home, in hospital, and then they're actually better, but they're not discharged for sometimes days and days and days. They languish in hospital because there's nowhere to go to them in the social care system. That's one thing we have to change. And the other thing we have to do is we have to give the inspectors, they're called CQC, as you would know, Jill, teeth. And we are giving them new powers to deliver prosecutions to people who behave in the way that the care home on Panorama yesterday is behaving towards the people in their care. They've been given new powers. They're having more specialised inspections going in there, and the law is being changed so that I think it's as of this autumn they'll be able to take up prosecutions themselves.
Jill, thank you. As the designers for Ford and Mercedes and Toyota scramble to make a 7-seater need an electric car, I'm sure, for the Deputy Prime Minister. We say farewell to Nick Clegg. We'll see you again same time, same place next week. This is LBC, where news is next.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Aziz. The Deputy Prime Minister has told LBC no single political party can investigate fully the abuse allegations against former Liberal MP Sir Cyril